My daughter-in-law told my son I was dead. She held a funeral. She bought flowers. She stood at a graveside and cried tears that weren't real over a man who was still breathing. My grandson grew up visiting a grave with my name on it. For 5 years, he believed his grandfather was buried under 6 feet of earth in a cemetery on the edge of town. Then one afternoon, at a gas station off Route 22, a boy I didn't recognize tugged on my sleeve and said, "Grandpa? Grandpa, is that you? We had a funeral for you." I looked down at this child, 9 years old, thin face, eyes so much like my son's that it hurt, and the world stopped turning. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If this story already has your attention, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. It truly helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these stories. And a gentle reminder, while this story is rooted in real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is purely coincidental. The truth behind the message is what matters. Stay with me. My name is Harold Dawson. I'm 72 years old, and I live in a small house on the outskirts of Knoxville, Tennessee. It's not much: 2 bedrooms, a porch that needs fixing, a yard I keep neat because that's how my wife, Pearl, would have wanted it. Pearl died in 2014, breast cancer. She fought it for 2 years, and she fought it the way she did everything else. Quietly, stubbornly, without complaint. After Pearl passed, it was just me and my son, Thomas. Tommy, I called him, though he stopped liking that name somewhere around age 16. Thomas was our only child. Pearl and I had tried for more, but it wasn't meant to be. So we poured everything we had into him. Every dollar, every prayer, every ounce of love 2 people from eastern Tennessee could give. I worked at Harlan Brothers Lumber for 41 years. Started at 18 hauling boards, retired at 59 as yard manager. It wasn't fancy work, but it put food on the table and a roof over our heads. Pearl worked at the county library for 28 years. Between us, we saved enough to pay off the house, put Thomas through community college, and tuck away about $220,000 in retirement savings. Not rich, not poor. Just careful, steady people who didn't spend what they didn't have. Thomas was a good boy growing up. Quiet, like his mother. He liked fishing and building things with his hands. He got a job at an auto repair shop after community college, and he was good at it. Honest work. The kind of work that makes your hands rough and your conscience clean. Then he met Vanessa.
Looks like you picked up a nail. Thomas, by the way. Don't worry, we'll get you fixed right up. Vanessa?
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Vanessa Cole walked into that repair shop on a Tuesday afternoon in September 2016 with a flat tire and a smile that could melt steel. She was 28. Thomas was 30. He called me that night and said, "Dad, I think I just met the woman I'm going to marry." I laughed. Thomas had never been the dramatic type, but something in his voice told me he was serious. I met Vanessa 3 weeks later. She came to the house for Sunday dinner. Pot roast, Pearl's recipe, the one I'd been making every week since she passed, because it made me feel like she was still there. Vanessa was beautiful. I'll say that plainly. Dark hair, green eyes, a way of walking into a room that made you notice her immediately. She was charming, too. Complimented the food before she'd tasted it, asked about Pearl, looked at the photographs on the mantel with what seemed like genuine warmth. But something bothered me. Something I couldn't name at first. It was the questions. Not the ones she asked Thomas. Those were normal, affectionate, the kinds of things a new girlfriend asks. It was the questions she asked me. "Mr. Dawson, this is such a lovely home. Have you lived here long?" 41 years, I said. Pearl and I bought it the year Thomas was born. It must be worth quite a bit now. This area has really developed. I looked at her. She was cutting her pot roast with precise, deliberate movements. Her eyes were on the food, but her attention was on my answer. I suppose it is, I said. I don't think about it much.
You should, she said, looking up with that smile. Real estate is the best investment there is. That's what my father always said.
It was a small moment, a few sentences over dinner. But I noticed it the way you notice a crack in a windshield. Small at first, easy to ignore, but you know it's going to spread. Later that evening, after Thomas and Vanessa had left, I sat on the porch in Pearl's rocking chair, the one she'd bought at a yard sale in 1989, and refinished herself. I rocked slowly and thought about Vanessa's questions. Pearl would have noticed too. Pearl had a gift for reading people. She used to say, "Harold, listen to what people ask. Questions tell you more about a person than answers ever will." Vanessa's questions told me she was interested in the value of things. Not the meaning, the value. But I told myself I was being an old fool. Thomas was happy, that's what mattered. And maybe Vanessa's questions were just making conversation. Maybe her father really did talk about real estate. Maybe I was reading too much into a pot roast dinner. I was wrong. But it would take me years to understand just how wrong. Thomas and Vanessa got married in April 2017. Small ceremony at the courthouse. I was the witness. Vanessa wore a white dress she'd bought at a department store, and Thomas wore the suit he'd worn to Pearl's funeral, because it was the only suit he owned. I watched my son say his vows, and I felt two things at once. Happiness that he'd found someone, and a cold, quiet unease that I couldn't shake. I smiled for the photographs. I hugged them both. I told Vanessa, "Welcome to the family," and I meant it because I wanted to mean it. I wanted to believe that my son had chosen well. Their first year of marriage seemed fine. Thomas kept working at the shop. Vanessa got a job as an office manager at a dental practice. They rented an apartment about 15 minutes from my house. Thomas came by every other Sunday for dinner. Sometimes Vanessa came, sometimes she didn't. When she didn't come, Thomas would make excuses. She's tired. She has a headache. She's visiting her mother. The excuses were always reasonable, always delivered with that slightly apologetic tone that sons use when they're caught between their wife and their father. I didn't push. Pearl had taught me that the fastest way to lose your child is to criticize their spouse. Let them figure it out, Harold. Be the safe place they come back to. So I made pot roast on Sundays, kept the porch light on, and waited for my son to come home. In March 2018, Thomas called me with news that changed everything. "Dad, Vanessa's pregnant. We're having a baby." I sat down in my kitchen chair and felt something I hadn't felt since Pearl died. Pure, uncomplicated joy. A grandchild. Pearl's grandchild. A new life carrying the Dawson name into a future I might not see, but could at least help build. "That's the best news I've heard in years, Tommy," I said, and I didn't even care that I'd used the name he didn't like. He laughed. He sounded happy. Really, truly happy. Oliver Thomas Dawson was born on November 4th, 2018. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. When the nurse placed him in my arms for the first time, I looked down at that tiny face and saw Pearl. The shape of his eyes, the way his mouth curved. It was Pearl, reborn in miniature, and I loved him with a ferocity that took my breath away. "He looks like Mom," Thomas said quietly, standing beside me. "He does," I said. "He really does." For the first year of Oliver's life, I was present. I visited twice a week. I held him while he slept.
I changed diapers with the same hands that had hauled lumber for 4 decades. I sang him the songs Pearl used to sing to Thomas. Old hymns, folk songs, the kinds of melodies that carry generations forward. Vanessa tolerated my presence at first. She'd smile when I arrived, hand me the baby, and disappear into the bedroom or the kitchen. She never seemed hostile, just distant, like I was a piece of furniture she hadn't chosen but couldn't throw away. But as Oliver grew, something shifted. Vanessa started making it harder for me to visit. "Harold, today isn't a good day. Oliver's been fussy." "Harold, we're trying to establish a routine. Too many visitors confuse him." "Harold, maybe you could call before you come next time? We need our space."
Each excuse was reasonable on its own, but together they formed a pattern. A slow, deliberate reduction of my access to my grandson. One visit a week became every other week. Every other week became once a month. Once a month became when it works for us. Thomas didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't fight it. He'd call me and say, "Dad, Vanessa thinks Oliver needs more structure. She's probably right. She reads all these parenting books." Parenting books. Vanessa was using parenting books as a weapon to keep a grandfather from his grandson, and Thomas was letting her. I should have said something then. I should have sat Thomas down and told him what I was seeing. But Pearl's voice was in my head. "Be the safe place, Harold. Don't push." So I didn't push. I accepted the reduced visits. I called instead of showing up. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents and hoped that whatever was happening would resolve itself. It didn't resolve. It escalated. In early 2019, about 4 months after Oliver was born, Vanessa started asking me about money. It began subtly. She mentioned that the apartment was too small for a family. She talked about wanting a house with a yard. She brought up mortgage rates and down payments and the cost of raising a child. "It's so expensive, Harold," she said one evening when I was visiting. "Diapers alone cost a fortune, and Thomas's salary at the shop barely covers rent." "I know it's tight," I said. "When Thomas was born, Pearl and I lived on beans and rice for a year." "But you had help, didn't you? Your parents?" "No. Pearl's parents were gone. Mine didn't have much." "But you managed to buy this house. Where did the down payment come from?" There it was again, that question. Not about how we survived, but about the money, about where it came from, about what I had. "We saved," I said simply. "For 7 years." Vanessa nodded, but I could see her doing calculations behind those green eyes. She was adding things up. The house, the savings, the life insurance Pearl had left, the pension from Harlan Brothers. She was assembling a picture of my financial life, and she was doing it with the precision of an accountant auditing a company's books. A few weeks later, Vanessa called me directly. This was unusual. She never called me. Communication always went through Thomas. "Harold, Thomas and I have been talking. We want to buy a house, but we can't afford the down payment. Thomas doesn't want to ask you because he's too proud. But I think family should help family, don't you?" "How much are you looking for?" I asked. $40,000 for the down payment. We pay you back, of course, eventually." $40,000. Merely a fifth of my retirement savings. Money Pearl and I had spent 41 years building. Money that was supposed to last me through whatever years I had left. That's a lot of money, Vanessa. I know. But think about it this way. It's an investment in Oliver's future. Your grandson deserves a home with a yard, don't you think? She was good. She knew exactly which button to push. Oliver, my grandson, the child who looked like Pearl, the child whose face I'd memorized in the delivery room. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course, take your time.
But Harold, I want you to know, Thomas really needs this. He just won't ask.
I sat with that request for a week. I talked to my friend Earl Buckley, who'd been my closest friend since high school. Earl was a retired insurance agent, practical, careful, the kind of man who reads the fine print on everything. "Don't do it, Harold," Earl said without hesitation. $40,000 is not a favor. It's a transfer of wealth. And she didn't ask Thomas to call you. She called herself. That tells you everything. She said Thomas was too proud to ask.
Or Thomas doesn't know she's asking. Harold, have you talked to Tommy about this? I hadn't. And when I called Thomas that evening and mentioned the conversation, his response confirmed Earl's suspicion.
"Vanessa asked you for money?" Thomas said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. "She told me she was going to look into loan options. She didn't say anything about calling you." "She asked for $40,000 for a down payment." There was a long silence. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know she was going to do that. I'll talk to her." "Tommy, is everything okay between you two?" Another silence, longer this time. "Yeah, Dad, everything's fine. She just gets ahead of herself sometimes. I'll handle it." He didn't handle it. 2 weeks later, Vanessa called me again.
Harold, Thomas said you two talked. I'm sorry if I overstepped, but I've been thinking, what if instead of $40,000, you added Thomas's name to the deed of your house? That way, when something happens to you, the house goes straight to Thomas without probate. It's just practical estate planning. I went cold. Adding Thomas to my deed wouldn't just simplify probate. It would give Thomas, and by extension Vanessa, legal ownership of my home. My home. The house Pearl and I built our life in. The house where Thomas took his first steps. The house where I still made pot roast every Sunday. "I'm not going to do that, Vanessa," I said quietly. "Harold, I'm just trying to think about the future. You're not getting any younger. What happens if something happens to you? The house should go to Thomas. He's your only child. The house will go to Thomas in my will when the time comes. But probate takes months, years sometimes, and the lawyers take a percentage. I'm just trying to protect the family's assets." "The family's assets," I repeated. "You mean my assets." There was a pause. Then Vanessa said in a voice that was no longer warm, no longer charming, "I mean our family's future, Harold. But if you want to be difficult about it, that's your choice." She hung up, and I sat in my kitchen, hands shaking, understanding for the first time exactly who Vanessa Cole really was. She wasn't interested in Thomas. She wasn't interested in family. She was interested in what the Dawson name was worth, and she was willing to play a long game to get it. How? Talk to a lawyer. Make your will airtight. Make sure that house and your savings are protected. And Harold, document everything. Write down every conversation, every request, every time she pushes, because someday you might need it. I bought a notebook the next day, a plain black composition notebook from the dollar store, and I wrote down everything Vanessa had said and done, starting from that first dinner when she'd asked about the value of my house. That notebook would become the most important thing I owned. After I refused to add Thomas to the house deed, things changed rapidly. Vanessa stopped pretending to be nice to me. The visits to see Oliver, already reduced to once a month, dropped to nothing. "Harold, Oliver's been sick. Now's not a good time." "Harold, we're busy this weekend. Maybe next month." "Harold, Thomas is working overtime. He'll call you." Thomas didn't call. When I called him, the conversations were short, strained. I could hear Vanessa in the background sometimes, and Thomas's voice would change.
become careful, measured, like a man walking through a minefield.
By summer 2019, I hadn't seen Oliver in 2 months. The boy was 8 months old, growing and changing every day, and I was missing it. I was missing everything. One afternoon, I drove to their apartment unannounced. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see my grandson. I knocked on the door and Vanessa answered. She was holding Oliver on her hip, and when she saw me, her expression went hard. "Harold, we weren't expecting you." "I know. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see Oliver. It's been 2 months." "I told you he's been sick, and Thomas isn't here." "I don't need Thomas to be here. I'm Oliver's grandfather. I just want to hold him for a few minutes." Vanessa stared at me for a long moment. Then she said something that cut me to the bone. "Harold, I think you need to understand something. Thomas and I are Oliver's parents. We decide who sees him and when. You don't get to just show up whenever you feel like it. That's not how this works."
Yeah, I'm his grandfather, and I'm his mother. My house. My rules. If you want to see Oliver, you call first. You ask permission, and you respect our boundaries. She closed the door, not slammed it. Closed it quietly, deliberately, with a click that sounded final. I stood on that doorstep for a long time. I could hear Oliver babbling inside. My grandson, Pearl's grandson, the child I loved with everything I had. And his mother had just told me I needed permission to see him.
I drove home in a fog. I sat on the porch in Pearl's rocking chair and I cried. Not the quiet, controlled tears of a man who's learned to grieve with dignity. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and primal. The kind that makes your chest hurt and your hands shake. I cried because I was losing my son. I was losing my grandson, and I didn't know how to stop it. I wrote in the notebook that night, every detail. The conversation at the door, Vanessa's exact words, the date, the time, the look on her face. I wrote it all down because Earl had told me to, and because I didn't know what else to do. Over the next several months, I tried everything. I called Thomas. I left messages. I sent cards for Oliver. I offered to meet them at a restaurant, a park, anywhere neutral. Every attempt was deflected, rescheduled, canceled. Thomas called me occasionally, always brief, always apologetic. "Dad, things are complicated right now. Vanessa and I are going through..."
Here's some stuff. Just give us some time. Tommy, I haven't seen Oliver since July. He's almost a year old. I'm missing his life. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I'll figure it out. He didn't figure it out. By November 2019, just after Oliver's first birthday, a birthday I wasn't invited to, I'd gone 4 months without seeing my grandson. Then, just before Christmas, Thomas came to my house alone.
He looked different, thinner, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. He sat at my kitchen table and stared at his hands for a long time before he spoke. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong, Tommy?" "Vanessa wants to move. She found a job in Virginia, better pay. She wants to start fresh, somewhere new." "Virginia? That's 7 hours away." "I know." "What about the shop, your job?" "She says I can find work anywhere. Mechanics are always needed." "Tommy, your whole life is here. My whole life is here. Oliver's life is here." Thomas looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Defeat. My son, the boy who used to build things with his hands, who could fix any engine, who'd always had a quiet strength about him. He looked beaten. "Dad, Vanessa's already accepted the job. We're moving in January." "And you agreed to this?" I don't know if I agreed.
It's just happening. Sighs. I sat across from my son and felt the pieces clicking together. Vanessa was isolating Thomas, moving him away from me, from Earl, from his friends, from everyone who might see what she was doing. She was taking him to a place where he'd have no support, no connections, no one to turn to except her. Tommy, listen to me. You don't have to do this. Dad, please don't. Don't what? Don't tell you the truth. She's taking you away from your home. She's taking Oliver away from his grandfather. Exhales sharply. She's my wife, Dad. I have to support her.
Support her or obey her. There's a difference. Thomas stood up. I shouldn't have come. I knew you'd react like this. Tommy, sit down. No, Dad. I love you, but Vanessa is my wife and Oliver is our son, and we're going to do what's best for our family. He left, and I stood in my kitchen feeling like I'd just watched my son walk off the edge of a cliff. They moved to Richmond, Virginia, in January 2020, 7 hours away. Thomas texted me the new address. Vanessa didn't. For the first few months, I drove out there once a month, 7 hours each way, 14 hours of driving to spend an afternoon with my grandson. I'd leave Knoxville at 4 in the morning and arrive around 11. Vanessa would let me in, barely, and I'd play with Oliver for a few hours while she watched from the doorway with her arms crossed. Oliver was walking by then, talking, calling me Papa because that's what
Thomas had taught him. Every time I heard that word, Papa, something broke and healed inside me at the same time. But Vanessa made every visit difficult. There was always a reason to cut it short. Oliver needs a nap. We have plans this afternoon. Thomas has to work early tomorrow. The excuses were endless, and each one shaved time off my visits until I was driving 14 hours for 90 minutes with my grandson. Then COVID hit, March 2020, and Vanessa had the perfect excuse to cut me off completely. Sighs. Harold, you're 66 years old. You're high risk. We can't let you come here. It's not safe for Oliver.
I'll wear a mask. I'll stay outside. I just want to see him. No, it's not worth the risk. We'll FaceTime. We FaceTimed twice. Both times Oliver was squirming, distracted, barely aware of the screen. Vanessa held the phone at an angle where I could barely see him. The calls lasted less than 10 minutes each. After the second call, I tried to schedule a third. Vanessa didn't respond. Thomas sent a text. Dad, things are crazy right now. We'll call soon. They didn't call. Weeks became months. Months became silence. By summer 2020, I hadn't heard from Thomas in 3 months. I hadn't seen Oliver since February. I called, I texted, I sent letters. I sent birthday cards for Oliver's second birthday in November. Everything went unanswered. It was like my son had disappeared into a hole that Vanessa had dug and sealed shut behind them. Earl came over one evening and found me sitting on the porch staring at nothing. Harold, when's the last time you heard from Tom?
Am I? June, he sent a text saying they were fine. That was 4 months ago. I know. Earl sat down beside me. Something's wrong. Sighs. I know that too. What are you going to do? I don't know, Earl. What can I do? He's a grown man. He made his choice. Frustrated. He didn't make a choice, Harold. He was maneuvered into a corner by a woman who's been isolating him since the day they met. That's not a choice. That's captivity.
Earl was right. But being right didn't give me a solution. Thomas was 7 hours away. He wasn't answering my calls. And Vanessa had built a wall around my son and grandson that I couldn't breach. I kept writing in the notebook, documenting every unanswered call, every unreturned text, every letter sent with no response, the dates,
the times, the silence. Then, in February 2021, something happened that changed everything. Thomas called me. It was 11 at night. His voice was strange, flat, robotic, like he was reading from a script. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." "Tommy, what's going on? Are you okay?" "Dad, please, just listen." He took a breath. "Vanessa and I have decided that it's best for our family if we limit contact with extended family for a while. We need to focus on ourselves, on Oliver, on building our life here in Richmond. That means no more visits, no more calls, no more letters."
Chills sharply. "Tommy, that's not..." "Dad, this is what we've decided. It's nothing personal. We just need space. I'll reach out when the time is right." "Tommy, is Vanessa there? Is she listening?" Silence. Then, very quietly, "Goodbye, Dad." He hung up. I called back immediately. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. No response. I called the next morning. The number was disconnected. Gasps. My son's phone number, the number I'd called every week for 30 years, was disconnected. Gone. Like he'd never existed.
I tried Vanessa's number. Disconnected. I tried the apartment's landline. No such number. I sent a letter to their Richmond address. It came back 3 weeks later. Return to sender. No forwarding address. My son, my grandson, my entire family, they had vanished. I drove to Richmond. 7 hours. When I got to their apartment building, the manager told me they'd moved out in January. No forwarding address. No information about where they'd gone. I stood in that empty parking lot in Richmond, Virginia, and I felt a kind of fear I'd never experienced before. Not anger, not sadness. Fear. The pure animal fear of a man who realizes he's been completely, methodically cut off from everyone he loves. I filed a missing persons report. The police took my information, but explained that Thomas was an adult who had the right to cut contact. He wasn't missing. He'd chosen to leave. "But my grandson," I said. "My grandson is only 2 years old."
He didn't choose anything. "Sir, the child is with his parents. Unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect, there's nothing we can do." I hired a private investigator, a man named Dale Strickland, ex-police, efficient, no nonsense. I gave him everything: Thomas's name, Vanessa's name, their social security numbers, their last known address. Relieved. Dale found them in 6 weeks. They'd moved to Nashville. Vanessa had gotten another job, this time at a medical supply company. Thomas was working at a different auto shop. Oliver was in daycare.
"Do you want me to make contact?" Dale asked.
"No, not yet. I just need to know they're alive."
"They're alive, Mr. Dawson. But there's something else you should know.
"What?"
Vanessa has been telling people that you're dead."
The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?"
Thomas's employer, their neighbors, the daycare, everyone who knows them in Nashville believes that Thomas's father died 2 years ago. Vanessa has told a consistent story. Heart attack, sudden, very sad.
"But I'm alive."
I know that, Mr. Dawson. But as far as Nashville, Tennessee is concerned, Harold Dawson is a dead man.
I sat in my kitchen that night and read Dale's report 3 times. Vanessa had told my son I was dead. No, that wasn't quite right. She'd told everyone else I was dead. The question was, what had she told Thomas? I called Dale back. "I need to know what Thomas believes. Does he think I'm dead, or does he know I'm alive?"
Dale investigated for another 2 weeks. What he found was worse than anything I'd imagined. Thomas believed I was dead. Vanessa had told him that I'd had a heart attack in June 2021, 4 months after that last phone call. She'd shown him a fake obituary she'd printed from the internet. She'd told him that Earl had called to deliver the news, but that Earl had been so upset he couldn't talk long. She'd told Thomas that the funeral had already happened by the time she found out, that Earl had handled everything because Thomas was too far away. She'd faked it all. The obituary, the death, the funeral, everything. And then she'd done something even more calculated. She'd arranged a gravestone. Dale found it in a cemetery in Knoxville, a real cemetery, with a real stone that read, Harold James Dawson, 1952 to 2021, beloved father and grandfather. She'd bought a gravestone for a man who was still alive.
Thomas had visited that grave. Dale found evidence that Thomas had driven to Knoxville at least twice, alone, to visit the cemetery. He'd brought flowers. He'd stood at a stone with his father's name on it and mourned a man who was sitting in a kitchen 20 minutes away, writing in a notebook, wondering why his son had disappeared. I read Dale's report, and I couldn't breathe. The room spun. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers on the floor. My daughter-in-law had murdered me. Not physically. She'd murdered my existence. She'd erased me from my son's life with a fake obituary and a real gravestone. She'd stolen my grandson's grandfather and replaced him with a lie. She'd taken everything. My son's love, my grandson's memories, my identity as a living person, and buried it under 6 feet of fiction. I called Earl. When I told him, there was silence on the line for a long time. Harold, Earl finally said, and his voice was shaking. We need to go to the police. The police can't help. She didn't commit a crime that they'll understand.
The hell she didn't. She fabricated your death. She placed a gravestone in a cemetery with your name on it. She's been committing fraud.
Earl, who's going to believe a 68-year-old man who walks into a police station and says, "My daughter-in-law told everyone I'm dead, but I'm actually alive"?
I believe you, and Dale's report proves it.
I sat with that report for 3 days. I read it over and over. I looked at the photographs Dale had included, pictures of the gravestone, pictures of Thomas at the cemetery, pictures of Oliver at a Nashville daycare playing in a sandbox, growing up without any knowledge that his grandfather was alive and 200 miles away. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. I wasn't going to confront Thomas, not yet. I was going to do what Pearl would have done. I was going to be patient. I was going to document everything. I was going to build a case so complete, so undeniable, that when the truth finally came out, there would be no room for Vanessa to lie her way out of it. I called Earl and told him the plan. I need your help. I need a lawyer. And I need time. How much time? As much as it takes. Earl connected me with a lawyer named Ruth Garrison. She was in her late 50s, practiced family law for 30 years, and had a reputation for handling cases that other lawyers called impossible. When I sat in Ruth's office and told her the story, she didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just listened, took notes, and when I finished, she said, "Mr. Dawson, what your daughter-in-law has done is extraordinary in its cruelty. But it's not unprecedented. I've seen variations of this before, a controlling spouse who cuts off family members and fabricates stories to maintain isolation. Can we prosecute her? Potentially. The fake obituary, the gravestone, the fraudulent death claim. These could constitute fraud, identity theft, and, depending on what she's done with your name, potentially insurance fraud. But the most important thing right now isn't prosecution, it's reunification.
You mean getting Thomas back. I mean getting Thomas to understand that you're alive. And that's going to be the hardest part. Because right now, your son has spent years grieving you. He's built his emotional reality around the belief that you're gone. When he finds out the truth, it won't just be relief. It will be rage, confusion, and a complete dismantling of his trust in his wife. We need to handle this carefully. How? We build the case first. We document everything Vanessa has done. We establish a timeline. We gather evidence. And when we're ready, we approach Thomas in a controlled setting where he can process the truth safely. I agreed. And for the next several months, Ruth, Dale, Earl, and I built a case.
Dale continued surveillance. He documented Vanessa's lies, the fake obituary she'd shown Thomas, the gravestone she'd purchased, the stories she told neighbors and co-workers. He tracked financial records and found that Vanessa had accessed information about my life insurance policy. She hadn't filed a claim. I was alive, and the insurance company would have verified, but she'd made inquiries. She was testing the waters. Ruth filed records requests and discovered something else. Vanessa had forged documents to change Oliver's birth certificate. Under paternal grandfather, where my name should have been, she'd written deceased. She'd also enrolled Oliver in a daycare using emergency contact forms that listed no grandparents. She'd systematically erased me from every official record she could touch. I continued writing in my notebook. Every finding, every discovery, every date, every detail. The notebook was thick now, 200 pages of Vanessa's lies documented in my careful handwriting. And through it all, I thought about Oliver, my grandson, who was 3 years old now and had no memory of me, who visited a gravestone with my name on it and had been taught that his grandfather was in heaven, who didn't know that the man Vanessa had buried was alive and fighting to come back. That's what kept me going. Not anger, not revenge. Oliver. The boy who looked like Pearl. The boy who deserved to know his grandfather. The boy whose mother had stolen his family and replaced it with a fiction. I was going to get him back. Whatever it took, however long it took, I was going to get him back. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2023, 5 years after Vanessa started cutting me off, fate intervened in a way none of us expected. I was at a gas station off Route 22. I'd been visiting Earl's brother in Cookville, about an hour east of Nashville. I'd stopped for gas and a coffee, nothing unusual. Just an old man filling his tank on a Tuesday afternoon. I was walking back to my truck with the coffee when I felt a tug on my sleeve, small fingers, insistent. I looked down. A boy was standing there, 9 years old maybe, thin face, brown hair that needed cutting, and eyes, those eyes that stopped me dead in my tracks. They were Pearl's eyes, the exact same shape, the exact same depth, the exact same quiet intensity. Grandpa? The word hit me like a lightning bolt. I stood there, frozen, coffee cup in my hand, staring at this child I hadn't seen since he was barely a year old. Grandpa? Is that you? I couldn't speak. My throat had closed. My hands were trembling. The coffee was shaking so badly, it was spilling over the sides of the cup. The boy looked up at me with an expression of total confusion, total wonder, total disbelief.
Grandpa, we had a funeral for you. Mom said you died. She said your heart stopped.
I dropped the coffee. It splashed across the concrete. I didn't notice. I was looking at Oliver. My Oliver. Pearl's Oliver. Standing in a gas station off Route 22, telling me about my own funeral. Oliver, I whispered.
and saying his name out loud after 5 years of silence was like breaking through the surface of water after being held under. "You know my name?" Oliver's eyes went wide. "How do you know my name? You're supposed to be dead." "I'm not dead, Oliver. I'm right here." "But Mom said, she said you had a heart attack. She said Daddy cried for a whole week. We went to your grave. I left flowers." I knelt down. My knees protested. My back screamed. But I knelt on that gas station concrete and looked my grandson in the eyes. "Oliver, I don't know why your mother said those things, but I'm alive. I've always been alive. And I've been looking for you for a very long time." Oliver stared at me. I could see his mind working, trying to reconcile the dead grandfather he'd been told about with the living man kneeling in front of him. Then his face crumpled, and he threw his arms around my neck and held on with a strength that seemed impossible for a child his size. "Papa," he whispered, the same word Thomas had taught him 5 years ago. He still remembered. After everything, he still remembered. I held him. I held my grandson in a gas station parking lot and felt something I'd been missing for 5 years. The physical reality of family. The weight of a child in your arms. The warmth of someone who belongs to you. The absolute, unshakable truth that love survives even the most elaborate lies. "Oliver!" A voice cut through the moment, sharp, afraid. Vanessa was crossing the parking lot, her face twisted with something between panic and rage. "Oliver, get away from him!" Oliver pulled back and looked at his mother with confusion. "But Mom, it's Grandpa, he's alive!" "Oliver, I said come here, now. But now!" Oliver flinched. The way he flinched, automatic, conditioned, told me everything I needed to know about the kind of household Vanessa was running. My grandson was afraid of his mother's voice. I stood up slowly. Vanessa was 5 feet away now, and for the first time in years, I was looking directly into the eyes of the woman who'd buried me alive. "Hello, Vanessa," I said quietly. Her face went through several transformations in rapid succession. Shock, fear, calculation. Then that smooth mask settled back into place, the one she'd worn at every dinner, every conversation, every lie. "Harold, what are you doing here?"
Getting gas. What are you doing telling my grandson I'm dead? Vanessa grabbed Oliver's hand and pulled him behind her. "Oliver, go to the car." "But Mom, car, now!" Oliver looked at me one last time. His eyes were full of questions I couldn't answer yet. Then he ran to the car and climbed inside. Vanessa turned back to me. Her voice dropped low. "You need to stay away from us, Harold." "Or what? You'll bury me again?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Dale Strickland says otherwise. So does my lawyer. So does the gravestone you bought with my name on it." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Real fear. The fear of someone who realizes their lie has been discovered. "You hired a private investigator?" 3 years ago. I know everything, Vanessa. The fake obituary, the disconnected phones, the move to Nashville, the gravestone, the altered birth certificate. All of it. Vanessa's face hardened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Thomas and I made a decision as a family to— Thomas thinks I'm dead. You told him I died. You showed him a fake obituary and took him to a fake grave. That's not a family decision. That's a crime." "It's not a crime to protect my family." "It is when protection means erasing a living person from existence." I stepped closer. "I'm alive, Vanessa. I've been alive this whole time. And Thomas is going to know the truth. Today. Vanessa's composure cracked, just for a second. Then she pulled herself together and said, "If you contact Thomas, I'll tell him you're a disturbed old man who's been stalking us. I'll get a restraining order. I'll make sure you never see Oliver again." You already made sure of that. For 5 years. But it's over now.
I turned and walked to my truck. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding. But for the first time in 5 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Because Oliver had recognized me. After 5 years, after being told I was dead, after visiting a fake grave, my grandson had walked up to me in a gas station and called me Papa. Vanessa's lies were strong, but Oliver's memory was stronger. I drove straight home and called Ruth Garrison. It happened. I saw Oliver. Vanessa knows I'm alive and that we have evidence. How did Oliver react? Ruth asked. He hugged me, Ruth. He remembered me. Good. That matters. Now listen. Vanessa is going to panic. She's going to try to run, or she's going to try to get ahead of this by controlling the narrative with Thomas. We need to move now. What's the plan?
I'm filing an emergency petition with the family court in Nashville tomorrow morning. We're requesting supervised visitation with Oliver and a court order preventing Vanessa from relocating. Simultaneously, I'm referring the criminal evidence to the district attorney. The fake obituary, the gravestone, the forged documents, that's fraud at minimum.
What about Thomas? Ruth paused. Thomas is the most delicate part of this. He's been manipulated for years. He believes you're dead. When he finds out the truth, it's going to break him. We need to control how and when he learns the truth. I don't want to control anything. I just want my son back. I know, Harold, and we're going to get him back. But we need to do this right. The next 48 hours were the most intense of my life. Ruth filed the emergency petition. Dale increased surveillance on Vanessa. Earl came to my house and didn't leave. He slept on my couch because he refused to let me be alone.
And I wrote in my notebook. The gas station. Oliver's face. His words.
Grandpa, we had a funeral for you.
I wrote it all down, word for word, because I knew that someday Thomas would read it, and he needed to see every detail. The court moved fast. The judge who received Ruth's petition, Judge Samuel Atkins, read the evidence and issued an emergency order within 24 hours. No relocation. Supervised visitation granted. And a summons for Vanessa to appear in court. But before the summons could be served, Ruth and I made a decision. Before the legal system took over, before the courts and lawyers and judges got involved, Thomas needed to hear the truth from me. Not from a lawyer, not from a judge, from his father. Ruth arranged it. She contacted Thomas through his employer, the auto shop in Nashville, and asked him to come to a meeting. She didn't tell him what it was about. She just said it involved a family matter that required his immediate attention. Thomas agreed. The meeting was set for a Saturday morning at Ruth's Nashville office. I drove to Nashville the night before. I stayed at a motel off the interstate. I didn't sleep. I lay in that motel bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine what I'd say to my son. The son who thought I was dead. The son who'd grieved for me. The son who'd visited my grave and left flowers. What do you say to someone who mourned you? How do you walk back into a life that buried you? How do you explain 5 years of silence to a person who thinks that silence is death? I didn't have answers. I just had the truth.
and I had to believe that would be enough. Saturday morning, Ruth's office. I was there at 8. Ruth was already setting up. Earl was with me. He'd driven separately and refused to stay in Knoxville. "You're not doing this alone," Earl said. "You've been alone for 5 years. That's enough." At 9:15, the door opened. Thomas walked in.
My son. My Tommy. He was 37 now. He looked older than that, thinner than I remembered, tired in a way that went past physical exhaustion into something deeper, something that lives in the bones. He had gray at his temples that hadn't been there 5 years ago. He saw Ruth first, then Earl, then his eyes found me. The sound Thomas made wasn't a word. It wasn't a scream. It was something between a gasp and a moan, something that came from a place beyond language. His face went white. His body went rigid. He staggered backward, hitting the doorframe with his shoulder. "No," he said. "No. This isn't. You died. You died." "Tommy," I said, and my voice broke on his name. "You had a heart attack. Vanessa told me. She showed me the obituary. I went to your grave. I went to your grave." His voice was rising. Panic. Disbelief. The shattering of 5 years of grief happening in real time. "I'm alive, Tommy. I've been alive the whole time." "That's not possible. I saw the gravestone. I saw your name. Harold James Dawson, 1952 to 2021. It was real. It was real." Ruth stepped forward gently. "Mr. Dawson, Thomas, please sit down. Your father is alive. He's been alive this entire time, and we have evidence that your wife fabricated his death." Thomas looked at Ruth like she was speaking another language. Then he looked back at me. I watched his eyes move across my face, cataloging the changes, the deeper wrinkles, the thinner hair, the 5 years of aging he'd missed, confirming, against everything he'd been told, that the man standing in front of him was his father. "Dad?" The word came out small, broken, the voice of a child, not a 37-year-old man. "It's me, son. I'm here." Thomas crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed me. Not hugged, grabbed. His arms went around me with a force that hurt my ribs, and he held on like a man who'd been drowning for 5 years and had finally found something solid. He was crying, shaking, making sounds I'd never heard from him before. Raw, primal sounds of grief, being overwritten by disbelief, being overwritten by something that wasn't quite joy, but was close to it. "I went to your grave," he kept saying. "I talked to you. I told you about Oliver. I told you I was sorry for not calling enough. I told you." His voice shattered. "I told you I should have been a better son." I held my boy, my grown son, taller than me, heavier than me, a man with his own child and his own grief. I held him and let him break apart because that's what he needed. To break apart so he could be put back together with the truth. We sat down eventually. Ruth gave Thomas water. Earl sat quietly in the corner, wiping his eyes. And then Ruth explained everything. She laid it out methodically. The timeline of Vanessa's manipulation, the isolation, the move to Richmond, the disconnected phones, the fabricated death, the fake obituary, the gravestone, the forged birth certificate, the altered records. She showed Thomas the private investigator's report. She showed him photographs of the gravestone. She showed him the fake obituary Vanessa had created. Thomas read every document. He looked at every photograph.
He listened to every detail. And with each piece of evidence, I watched something die behind his eyes. The love he'd had for Vanessa, the trust he'd given her, the life he'd believed was real. "She told me you had a heart attack," Thomas said, his voice hollow. "She said Earl called and told her. She said the funeral happened fast because you would have wanted it that way. Simple. Quick." "Earl never called her," I said. "Earl didn't know where you were."
Thomas looked at Earl. Earl shook his head, tears running down his face. "Tommy, I've been with your father every step of this. I never spoke to Vanessa. I didn't even know where you'd moved." "She cried," Thomas said, and there was something horrifying in his voice. "She cried when she told me. She held me while I sobbed. She said, 'I'm so sorry, baby. I know how much he meant to you.' And she was lying. The whole time. She was lying." "Yes," Ruth said gently. "She was." Thomas put his head in his hands. 5 years. 5 years I thought my father was dead. 5 years Oliver has grown up without his grandfather. 5 years I've been carrying this grief, and it was all manufactured by the woman sleeping next to me." "Thomas," Ruth said, "I need to ask you something important. Were there other lies? Other things Vanessa told you that you now question?"
Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he started talking. And what came out was a flood. Years of lies he'd accepted, manipulations he'd normalized, control he'd mistaken for love. Vanessa had told him I'd refused to help them financially, that I'd said I didn't care about Oliver. She'd told him Earl had said terrible things about Thomas behind his back. She'd told him his childhood friends had reached out to say they didn't want contact anymore. She'd told him his employer in Knoxville had given a bad reference, which was why he couldn't find good work in Richmond. None of it was true. All of it was Vanessa, systematically destroying every relationship, every connection, every lifeline Thomas had outside of her. "She took everything," Thomas said. "She took my father. She took my friends. She took my home. She took Oliver's grandfather. And she made me thank her for it."
I reached across the table and took my son's hand. "She didn't take everything, Tommy. She didn't take this. You're here. I'm here. And Oliver knows I'm alive." Thomas looked up. "Oliver knows." "He found me at a gas station. He walked up to me and said, 'Grandpa, we had a funeral for you.'" Thomas closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek. "He remembered you." He remembered. The legal proceedings that followed moved with a speed that surprised even Ruth. Thomas moved out of the Nashville apartment that same weekend. He took Oliver and drove to Knoxville. They stayed at my house, my small 2-bedroom house that suddenly felt like a palace because my son and grandson were in it. Oliver adjusted with the resilience that only children have. Within days, he was calling me Papa again, following me around the yard, asking questions about Pearl, about the house, about the life his mother had hidden from him. "Papa, did you really live here when Daddy was little?"
"I did. Your daddy learned to ride a bike right there in the driveway." "Did my grandma live here too?" "She did. Her name was Pearl. She would have loved you more than anything in this world." "Mom said you were both dead." "Your grandma is in heaven, Oliver. But I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." Ruth filed criminal charges against Vanessa. The district attorney's office took the case seriously. The fabricated death, the gravestone, the forged documents, the isolation and emotional abuse all added up to a pattern that prosecutors called one of the most elaborate cases of family fraud we've seen. Vanessa was arrested 3 weeks after the gas station encounter. She was charged with fraud, forgery, identity theft, and emotional abuse. She tried to fight it. She hired a lawyer. She claimed that I had been abusive, that she'd fabricated my death to protect Thomas and Oliver.
The evidence destroyed her defense. Dale's surveillance reports, Ruth's documentation. My notebook. 200 pages of meticulous records spanning 5 years. Thomas's testimony about the lies she'd told. The fake obituary traced back to her computer. The gravestone purchase receipt with her credit card. The forged birth certificate. The trial lasted 6 days. Vanessa took the stand and tried to paint herself as a protective mother. The prosecutor dismantled her story in 40 minutes. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa was sentenced to 4 years in prison. She was also ordered to pay restitution for the gravestone, the legal costs, and the emotional damages. Thomas was granted full custody of Oliver. After the sentencing, Thomas and I stood outside the courthouse. Oliver was with Earl, getting ice cream across the street. The October sun was warm, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt like I could breathe. "Dad," Thomas said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" For believing her. For not questioning the obituary. For not trying harder to confirm what she told me. I should have called the hospital. I should have called Earl. I should have done something. Tommy, you were being manipulated by someone who'd spent years learning exactly how to control you. That's not your fault. I visited your grave. I stood there and talked to you. I told you things I never told you when I thought you were alive. What kinds of things? Thomas was quiet for a moment. I told you I was sorry for not being a better son. I told you I should have called more. I told you I wished I'd brought Oliver to see you more often before the move. I told you. His voice cracked. I told you I missed your pot roast. I laughed, the first real laugh in 5 years. And then Thomas laughed too. And then we were both laughing and crying at the same time, standing on the courthouse steps, alive and together and free. I'll make you pot roast tonight, I said. Pearl's recipe. Yeah? Thomas smiled. Oliver's never had it. Then it's time. That night I made pot roast for the first time in years. Pearl's recipe. The one I've been making every Sunday since she died. The one I'd stopped making when there was no one left to share it with. Oliver sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Thomas had eaten as a boy, the same table where Pearl had balanced our checkbook and planned our future. He swung his legs and watched me cook with curious eyes. Papa, is this the recipe from Grandma Pearl? It is. How did you know? Daddy told me. He said Grandma Pearl made the best pot roast in Tennessee. I looked at Thomas, who was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and tears in his eyes. He nodded. She did, I said. And now I'm going to teach you how to make it. So someday, when you're old like me, you can make it for your family. Oliver grinned. I'm never going to be old like you, Papa. That's what I said too. And look at me now. We ate together that night. 3 generations of Dawsons at the same table. The pot roast was good. Not quite Pearl's, never quite Pearl's, but close enough to feel her presence in the room. After dinner, Oliver fell asleep on the couch. Thomas carried him to the spare bedroom and came back to the kitchen, where I was washing dishes. Dad, I need to ask you something. Anything. How did you survive it? 5 years thinking your son abandoned you. 5 years being told you didn't exist. How did you keep going? I dried my hands and leaned against the counter. I kept going because of Oliver. Because I knew that somewhere out there, a boy who looked like Pearl was growing up without his grandfather. And I couldn't let that be the end of the story. But the loneliness, the grief,
thinking we'd chosen to leave you.
That was the hardest part, I admitted. Not being dead to the world. Being dead to you. Knowing that you were out there, mourning me, visiting a grave with my name on it, while I was alive and alone. That almost broke me. What stopped it? Pearl. Her voice in my head telling me to be patient, to keep writing in that notebook, to trust that the truth would find its way out. And Earl, that stubborn old man who wouldn't let me give up. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you." "You don't need to make anything up, Tommy. You're here. Oliver's here. That's enough. That's everything." Today it's been 8 months since the gas station. Thomas and Oliver live with me in the house on the edge of Knoxville. The house Pearl and I built. The house that Vanessa tried to take. The house that survived everything because it was built on something stronger than real estate. It was built on love. Thomas went back to work at an auto shop in town. He's good at his job. His hands are rough again from honest work, and his conscience is clean. He's started therapy, working through 5 years of manipulation, 5 years of false grief, 5 years of believing a lie that had been built around him like a prison. Oliver is in 4th grade. He's thriving. He has friends. He laughs easily. He calls me Papa every morning when he comes downstairs for breakfast. He asks about Pearl constantly. What she looked like, what she sounded like, what she would have said about his school projects. I tell him everything. I make sure Pearl lives in his memory the way she lives in mine. Earl comes over every Sunday. We sit on the porch and watch Oliver play in the yard. We drink coffee and talk about nothing and everything. Earl never says, "I told you so." He doesn't need to. We both know. The gravestone is still in the cemetery. Ruth advised me to leave it there as evidence. But someday, when the legal proceedings are fully closed, I'm going to go there. I'm going to stand at that stone with my name on it, and I'm going to read it. Harold James Dawson, 1952 to 2021. And then I'm going to walk away. Because I'm not that man. That man is a fiction created by a woman who thought she could erase a father from existence. I'm the real Harold Dawson. I'm alive. I'm here. And I'm having pot roast with my grandson tonight. And to you listening to this, I need to say something important. What Vanessa did to my family isn't unique. Family isolation happens every day. Controlling spouses separate their partners from parents, from friends, from everyone who might see the truth. And sometimes the lies are so big, so bold, so unthinkable, that no one questions them. If someone in your life has suddenly gone silent, a son, a daughter, a grandchild, don't accept the silence. Don't assume they've chosen to leave. Look deeper. Ask questions. Because sometimes the people we love aren't gone. They're trapped. And they need someone stubborn enough to find them. I'm Harold Dawson. I was declared dead by a woman who wanted to control my son. I was buried in a cemetery I'd never chosen, mourned at a funeral I never attended, and erased from the life of a grandson who still remembered my name. But I'm alive. And the truth, it turns out, is harder to bury than a man. If this story touched you, please share it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about family, betrayal, and justice. Your support helps us reach people who need to hear these stories. And before we close, a gentle reminder. This story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, I completely understand. Take care of yourselves. But if you're still here,
thank you. From the bottom of my heart. Pearl would have liked you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a pot roast to make.